You've probably had a friend that dressed up as a witch before for Halloween, with the pointy hat and black robe. However, centuries ago, witches were feared of working with the devil. In 1692, the Salem witch trials occurred, and is a dark historic event with many innocent deaths. Arthur Miller's play, The Crucible, is a very similar depiction of the true event, although exaggerated slightly to make for a better and deeper plot. First, I will talk about the history of witches throughout Europe and how the town of Salem had become the location of perceived witchcraft. Next, I will go over the historic event of the Salem witch trials, explaining what exactly occurred that year in 1692 and the events that followed it. Finally, I will explore the connections to the play, The Crucible, makes to the historic event, and the similarities and differences that are present between the two. First of all, before witches were what we know them as now, they were known to be people serving the devil. As the History.com states, the real history of witches, however, is dark and often for the witches deadly. Therefore, we should become more knowledgeable on this dark history of witches before looking at the Salem trials. Many religions, although mainly Christians, believed in witchcraft between the 1300s and the end of the 1600s. At this time, it has been said that Europe was going through a phase called the witch craze. These witches were people who participated in witchcraft, using spirits to change things, and were under the control of the devil and were doing his work for him. It was not until the 1400s that witches started to become more known in Europe, especially in Germany, which has the most executions throughout Europe. It was also at this time that many witches had started to confess on witchcraft, often being because they were being tortured into it. Since there was confessions of witchcraft, people had become more fearful of them. This started the witch hunt, where any found witches would be burned at the stake or hung. The History.com states that between the years of 1500 and 1600, up to 80,000 suspected witches were put to death in Europe, and mainly women, stated by Jess B. Tens of thousands of supposed witches, mostly women, were executed. Now, the trials that occurred in Salem were during the end of this witch craze in Europe, and it was caused by many different factors. Initially, these settlers arrived to the New World and were now isolated within the strongly religious community of Salem. This is why they had such heightened fear of the devil. They feared the forest and believed that it was tied with the devil, since natives would come and attack them from it. Furthermore, two political issues had caused them to be even more on edge. First, in 1686, the Massachusetts Bay Charter that to colonize was revoked because they were basing their laws on religion. Residents felt like their religion beliefs were being attacked specifically by the devil, as stated by the History of Massachusetts. In this 17th century Massachusetts, people often feared that the devil was constantly trying to find ways to infiltrate and destroy Christians and their communities. Second, in 1689, the English had started war with France. This caused many people to migrate to Salem as refugees. This created a strain on resources, families began to fight for agriculture and land, and revenge had been brewing. In brief, witches had become feared by everyone in Europe, and now Salem, resulting in anything different being blamed on witches.